Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Geeky and the Brain, the podcast where we talk about all things nerdy. My name is Colleen. I am the geeky editor that does a lot of this stuff. Um, to my right or left, I don't know where I'm going to put her today, is Dr. Nicole. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Nicole.
I am Nicole. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, even though my hoodie would say otherwise. And I am a full-time geek and enjoy talking about all things nerdy.
And today we're going to continue our conversation on Fallout, the show. If you haven't watched it yet, this is going to be full of spoilers. If you watched our first episode, you know it's full of spoilers. If you haven't watched it yet, go give it a check. It's pretty cool. We talk about the vaults and the experiments and the horrible things that they do, which is always my favorite topic when we talk about Fallout because I find the vaults absolutely fascinating, and I know Nicole does too. So go check out our first episode if you haven't done so yet. You might see a couple of references in this episode about that episode, so if you haven't done so, go check it out. Also, if you are here and you like what you see at any time, click that like button. We do want to hear all about whether you think we're right and wrong about our opinions. We will have a couple of things that we're going to talk about today that may hit an opinion that you don't agree with. Please put them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And, maybe you'll sway our opinions too. Who knows? And if you really like what you see and want to see more of it when we go live, we try to do this once a week. On Tuesdays, we try to release a new episode. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date when we put a new video up. So, our first topic for today is none other than the amazing Ghoul. Let's talk about the Ghoul here. I'll preface by saying he is my favorite character. I am very looking forward to this conversation. I went into the show thinking I was going to get a Hancock 2.0, and it honestly kind of made me uncomfortable because I went in with the wrong assumption. Never do this in shows. I went in with the assumption that I was going to get a Hancock ripoff, and instead, I got a very interesting new character. However, it kind of hurt my heart a little bit because he's not quite like Hancock. I know a lot of people still compare the two, but we're going to talk about why they're not the same. But let's start with your notes, Nicole, on the Ghoul. What do you want to talk about?
So with the Ghoul, I saw him very much as the anti-hero trope, essentially. And there's a quote that he says pre-Ghoul phase that I felt was a good summary of him, which was a good bad guy doesn't see himself as a bad guy, which is very true of the anti-hero. An anti-hero, they have imperfections, morally gray areas, and uncertainties. Their behavior is very unpredictable, and they often do the wrong thing, but for the right reasons. So one of my favorite anti-heroes of all time is Jason Todd, Red Hood.
What? It's not like it's behind you right now.
I, eh, um, but the reason that he is my favorite is because he understands that Batman has a moral code. We don't kill. I get it. But sometimes when you think of characters like the Joker, who kills Jason Todd, it kind of makes sense, to take him off the board. So that's what Jason Todd's moral code is. He's like, look, some people just don't deserve to live. We put them in Arkham, we put them in Blackgate, they get out, they do more of the same. I felt the Ghoul had very similar tendencies. What we learn in the last episode is he's looking for his family. And he's going to whatever means possible in order to find them. There's a lot of traits that go along with being an anti-hero. So they make selfish decisions and they don't care about the consequences. So for the Ghoul, he's doing what he feels is best for his own self-interest. He is looking for his family and he is going to find them by any means necessary. He doesn't even care if it puts other people in danger. So, for example, with Lucy, when the head is missing, he's using her as bait to attract the gulper. Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning. He's not necessarily evil. He just doesn't have the same honor as somebody who's a traditional hero. They also feel like they're fighting for a noble cause, but with questionable methods. So again, noble cause, finding family. In order to find family, killing people. A little questionable. They believe in something that motivates them. They're often very morally gray. They might be fighting for the greater good, which we do see a little bit even pre-war Ghoul, where he sees that Vault-Tec is not necessarily a good entity. There is bad intentions there. And so he is eavesdropping on his wife without her knowledge. Um, he's attending these meetings in order to get a better understanding of what is going on. So it is for the greater good, but again, questionable methods in order to get it all figured out. And those questionable methods do lead to some inner conflict and turmoil, and they may not be proud of their actions due to selfishness. So again, he's listening in on his wife's conversations. He's implanted this little bug that he can hear. He doesn't necessarily feel good about it. You see him at one point even throwing the thing out and saying, "This is stupid. Why am I doing this?" But he feels it is necessary to kind of figure out what Vault-Tec is up to. Of course, the biggest trope of the anti-hero is they rebel against authority in society. They don't want to play by the rules, because who does? They don't want to be told what they can and can't do. Lucy confronts the ghoul. Golden rule, do unto others as you would have done unto you. And his response to that was, when it was something like, when exploring the wasteland, you will always get sidetracked by bullshit, or something like that. He does not believe in the golden rule whatsoever. And of course, anti-heroes, they're very self-destructive and can be a little antisocial. Again, there's that inner conflict going on. They have no coping mechanisms whatsoever. They become self-destructive or they isolate. So when I think about this particular trait of an anti-hero, I think of V for Vendetta. The guy was experimented on in this essentially what looks like a concentration camp. And he wants to take down the government as revenge. But in order to do that, he has to isolate himself from the rest of the population in order to achieve his goal. And he's blowing up Parliament and all these other things. So, yeah, a little bit of self destruction going on there. Anti-heroes are also cynical, as one would expect. They see the world as a very dark place. They don't trust people. They just become cynical about life altogether. So again, when he's thinking about Vault-Tec and everything like that, when his wife is telling him about these things, he does have a very cynical outlook on it. Like, there's something that's not right here. They don't allow dogs in the vaults. Something's weird. And of course, they have a troubled past. It's usually rooted in some sort of trauma, as most anti-hero tropes are. Again, if we're thinking about trauma, dropping a nuclear bomb, what can be more traumatic than that? Another trauma is losing people that are closest to you. Again, he's lost his family. He has no idea where they are, doesn't even know if they're alive. So that's traumatizing. And they also might feel betrayed by people that are supposed to be trustworthy. So again, his wife, who he very much loves, is working for this company that is going to drop a nuclear bomb. Kind of hard to get around that a little bit. This is somebody he trusted and they essentially betrayed them. I'm doing a lot of talking,
Oh,
so
I love it. I talked a lot last episode, so I feel like it's your turn. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the just focusing on the anti-hero piece first, because I know there's other things that we're going to talk about with him. Um, I think that spot on. I mean, you could tell he was the anti-hero from the very first like word across the screen where they do like the old western, like the ghoul, and that he just goes by the ghoul. Nobody calls him by anything. Even the guy that knows him, the ghoul that knows him from the past, doesn't say anything about who he is or what his name is. He may never tell anybody his name, and honestly, it's probably a little bit to do with shame, of being
mhm.
he's the vault boy. They've referenced it many times. It's his cartoon version is the Vault Boy. So he was the face of the company that eventually destroyed the planet. So I think that spot on everything. I don't disagree with anything you said. I like that they kept giving him that purpose of like, where the hell is my family? Because last time we saw, his daughter was with him. When the bomb started dropping, his daughter was with them. So I want to talk about his wife at some point in this episode because I there's a little something I want to talk about with her. But I think that the few notes that I had when you were talking, him not trusting society, there is no society anymore. So I don't think that's as though he definitely personifies it. There's not a person alive on the surface that has no trust issues. Like everybody's got trust issues because everybody's been screwed over at one point or another from raiders, from losing family members too early, from super mutants, from fucking excuse me, from freaking rad roaches. Just a bug could kill you, and even early on in 76, you in 76, just for timeline purposes, just to flush it out, it occurs 25 years after the bombs dropped. So that was a standard vault. I still think there's a experiment going on, but we won't go down that road. Um, People didn't know how to even survive. They didn't know to boil water. They didn't know to how to cook their meals because everything was you see in the show. She's eating like deviled eggs out of a box. Everything was processed to the point where nothing went bad for 200 years. So you could even walk around the wasteland and open a can of potato crisps and they're fine because everything was so processed. So everything you ate was nothing was really fresh anymore. Everything was frozen, processed, and spam and all that crap. So people didn't know how to even eat and cook. So they had a couple of people being able to teach people, you have to boil your water, stupid. You have to cook your meat because they were eating raw meat from like a Brahmin. So there was never any time where antisocial behavior was you would get killed. It was like natural selection. It was like you were evolving out of the ability to trust society. Um, but I think still he personifies that, like you said, isolation. Yeah, it was forced upon him at one point, like he was in the coffin. Um,
Mhm.
I still want to know about that whole situation, how he got into that situation, uh, but even after that, like he doesn't bring in anybody besides the dog and Lucy because he wants to trade it for the medicine. Um, he's not traveling with any companions. He doesn't meet anybody. He doesn't talk to anybody. He doesn't know anybody in Philly or anything like that. So it's pretty clear. But I think after 200 years of wandering a wasteland, trying with one goal, and like you said, they focus on that one thing, and like nothing else matters, and nobody else matters except for that goal. Um, yeah, you'd get that way for sure. I don't know how any
Mhm.
pre-war ghoul survives without having some kind of goal, because like you would just waste away.
Mhm. And I think it's important to touch on too with him the guilt. There is a lot of guilt going on with him. For somebody that seems like he is a non-feeling entity, there is a lot of that. And when it comes to guilt for a situation like this, I like to touch on what's called survivor's guilt. Survivor's guilt is exactly what it sounds like. A person feels guilty for surviving something that others did not. They don't understand why they were allowed to live while all these other people passed on. So we have the nuclear bomb dropping. He did survive it, not sure where his family is. And I believe that this is part of what motivates him. They have a lot of guilt about the things that they have failed to do, which causes them to relive those events over and over again. And we see this. He's, traveling the wasteland, and we're getting these flashbacks of what his life was like before. And granted, it does add more elements to the story for us to help to understand the ghoul a little bit more, but it does seem like he is the one that is thinking about it, reliving those moments. And another thing that I think he has guilt about is he knew about the bomb. He knew. Did he tell anybody? We don't know. It kind of just ends. Those flashbacks end with his wife saying, "We're going to drop the bomb ourselves." And we don't know what's happened after that.
Mm-hmm.
We know the bomb was dropped, but from the time that he heard his wife say it to the time that the bomb is dropped, we don't know what happened. I'm assuming he didn't tell anybody of relevance because they were still able to drop the bomb.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel that there is a lot of guilt going on with him. He failed to save his family to his knowledge because he doesn't know where they are. He failed to stop the nuclear bomb from going off, whether that was his own decision or it just happened. And he was able to survive something that others were not able to survive. And he's lived for, like you said, 200 years. He's had 200 years to ruminate on this. That's, I mean, again, not based in real life. Anybody, we don't live to be 200 years old, but I got to imagine that that takes a toll on you after a while. So when I watched this, that is like the big thing that I got, because, and that's why I don't see him as a villain. I know a lot of people see him as the villain in the show. I don't see him that way because villains do not care. They don't have any guilt. He does. So that's where part of where I got the anti-hero trope as well, because he feels it so strongly.
Oh yeah, it's plain as day that he is. Anybody thinks that he's a villain. I'd love to know if anybody has an opinion of why you think he's a villain. Please, by all means, put it in the comments. We'll touch on the guilt, and then we'll talk about the villain trope, and why I disagree with it as well. The guilt is palpable. You can tell, and it wasn't even just during the show. You see the guilt ahead of time with him. He's very stubborn about everything, but you see him change, and that guilt kind of catches up with him, because in the beginning, in his pre-war days, he ends up, I mean, he's helping his wife, but he ends up using his face for Vault-Tec. And with you see at the beginning he didn't have that. He's like, well, I'm a famous actor, I make the money, I'm a spokesperson, it's a legit business, my wife works for it, all good. But then, he goes to the party and he's like, well, people are acting weird about me. They're, saying mean things to me when I go to, talk to people, and people won't work with me anymore. And the man who does Codsworth voice, and kind of a cool little snippet, that's actually the voice actor that does the Codsworth voice in the
Oh.
game. So it's pretty cool because, as soon as you hear him, you know exactly who he is. But he says, I made money. It's there's two ways to go now, right? There's the losing side,
Mhm.
which is communism, or there's the sell your soul for capitalism. And capitalism's going to win no matter what, so you might as well do what you have to do to stay on the winning side. Because he was getting the same treatment for putting his voice to is it Robco? I think Robco makes him. To another, huge corporate entity that took his voice, and now it's in millions of robots across the United States. But a little backstory about pre-war America. Um, he's sitting in a hot tub. He's drinking martinis with his beautiful wife. They have a gorgeous house. Palm trees and all of that. And he's just like, I want to move I want to move to a ranch. I want to get out of here. I'm done with this. And she's like, no, my
Mhm.
job. All that stuff. But there was a recession going on at that time. Not everybody was doing well. The inflation, they never touch upon it, which kind of made me sad, because it's kind of a running joke in the Fallout universe. The inflation was like, for a cup of coffee and a donut was like $20, or fifty
Hmm.
dollars. I think it was like $50.
I
You
wouldn't
know,
survive.
no. Well, I mean, you made, obviously, like, he probably made billions for a movie rather than millions. But so other people are struggling while he's living a life of luxury. So when the coworker who played the Native American in all of his movies that ended up dying and on the receiving end of this justice sheriff guy, he's like, you have to come you have to come see this person speak. You have to come join this, see this communism kind of thing. Um, to see the truth. And he seems like much more closer to the other end of the spectrum of, like, yeah, he's still making money because he's an actor, but he's certainly not in a hot tub, drinking martinis. So more of like the working man kind of aspect. So it was cool to see that dynamic. So that's where you start seeing that guilt kind of like play into it. I'm wondering if by the end
Mhm.
he was kind of seeing everything wrong with what has been going in pre-war America. And then, of course, knowing that the nukes are going to drop, living with the woman that said, we're going to drop a nuke. Um, and then, seeing the nuke itself. And in the first episode, I'm babbling now. In the first episode, one of the guys says, I can't believe, Cooper Howard's doing kids' birthdays. And he's like, oh, for the alimony check, I'm sure. So he definitely divorced his wife. Or his wife divorced
Mhm.
him, I should say. And it's probably, my guess is, he brought it up to her and was like, what the frig? And she was like, well, and Vault-Tec's powerful enough that he wasn't going to work anymore. But if he just disappeared, probably wouldn't look as good, right? So, um, yeah, I'm interested to see that as well, seeing where that goes. But couldn't agree more. The guilt is just eating him up. Um,
Hmm.
to we'll go back to your notes in a second, but I think to touch base on the ghoul or the ghoul being a villain, I don't think they ever played it up that way, in my opinion. And
Hmm.
again, if you disagree, I want to hear the comments. I want to see. I'm totally fine changing my opinion if a good enough argument is presented. I do not think that they ever really portrayed him as that, mainly because a he does have a heart, like in the pre-war and here. You know, he didn't have to take Lucy with him at the very end,
Hmm.
but he was like, "Hey, if you want to learn who your makers are, if you want to meet your makers, come with me." He is so fine traveling by himself. Like he can do this all by himself. I mean, he took on like what 5, 6 Brotherhood of Steel soldiers in full freaking power armor. Like, dude does not need
Hmm.
help. Does not need Lucy at all. But he took her in and said, "I know how you feel. I know where you are right now. Come with me. You can actually do something about it, or go home and pretend nothing happened." And again, going back to that whole
Hmm.
like you're presenting with new information, what do you do with it? We already know that through the whole show, she's been internalizing it, changing her view on the world. She's ready to continue that change so that she gets the whole truth. But he didn't have to do that. So I don't think he's a villain. Does he do bad things? 1000%. But when you put it into the perspective of what he knows, like put yourself in his shoes for some of the bad things. He shot his friend in the head. He was turning into a ghoul. To him, that was the most humane thing he could do for his friend. Was say, "Hey, remember how good food tastes?" Oh, because ghouls can't taste food very well. That's why he says it that way. That's why he can pretty much eat whatever he wants because he can't taste anything anymore. Not like humans do. So he's like, "Remember how good food tastes? Oh, Blamco macaroni and cheese." And then he goes, "Apple pie and ice cream." He goes, "Oh, apple pie." And then he turns his head to talk to Lucy, and then he shoots him. He wanted him to be in a good state of mind when he passed, so that it would be quick, easy, and he was thinking about something good before he left. In my opinion, a villain would not do that. Then we look at using Lucy as bait. Bad thing. In his mind, this is some stupid vault dweller. He doesn't know that she's looking for her dad, even though I think she might have said it, but everybody's looking for somebody. He's looking for his wife and kid. He doesn't know what she's been through. He doesn't know she's the main character of the show. She doesn't know, anything about her. He knows he needs that head so that he can figure out where his freaking family is. It's all a means to an end for him. So, thinking about it that way, 200 years, you've suffered through this life, all with the one goal of finding your family. You're finally seeing maybe there's some progress that you can do. I'd use somebody as freaking bait too. Now, I do play a raider in Fallout most of the time, but that doesn't matter. The point is, putting it in the perspective and looking through the world through his eyes, you can understand where he's coming from. He's kind of like a Lex Luthor character. The Lex Luthor is definitely villain category. When you think about it, he's
Hmm.
not wrong in a lot of the things he says. It's shit, and we know both sides of the story, so we can look at it differently. Same thing with the ghoul. You have to put all the bad shit that he does, put it into perspective. If you were that person, you were searching for your family for 200 years. You find out that somebody from the Enclave, I won't ruin it for anybody else because the second season hasn't come out. You know who the Enclave is. So if you hear a scientist from the Enclave has escaped and is making his way towards somebody that you also know, that why the frig is she still alive? Something's going on. And if it's your last ditch effort to find your family, you're going to freaking do it. So if you disagree, totally fine. You can disagree with my opinions. Please put them in the comments, though. I want to know why you disagree.
I do think that the biggest piece of it that I've seen where people talk about him being a villain is with the organ harvesting. That he is out of his drugs, whatever those drugs are. It doesn't look like mentats. I do know mentats.
She does know
Um,
mentats.
I do know the mentats. But he's basically trading her to have her organs harvested. He makes it seem like, or at least the robot made it seem like they're going to repair her and everything's going to be good. And it seems nice until they're like, we're going to harvest your organs. And he does it so that he can get more of the drug because he's dying. I get it. because when we're seeing that, okay, yes, it seems pretty villainous, but we have to remember this is a post-apocalyptic world. And in a post-apocalyptic world, survival and the psychology of survival really play into this. Like, because our primal instinct when we're in those situations is to live and to find the will to live. His will to live is to find his family by any means necessary. If that means trading somebody that he doesn't know all that well that comes from the vault world so that he can get the medicine that he needs in order to keep pursuing it, that's what he's going to do. And I feel like anybody in that situation might do the same thing. You might want to believe that you're going to be moral and you wouldn't do that, but we are not in a situation like that. When we're confronted with it, it might be a very different type of scenario. And I would love to see a psychological experiment that shows this. That would be unethical, but it would be very interesting to see how, in a situation like that, when you are confronted, especially with your own mortality, after everything that you've been through for 200 years, in order to bring down, it seems like he wants to bring down Vault-Tec. So bring down Vault-Tec, find your family. You're going to do whatever you need to do. And that doesn't make you a villain necessarily. That's, again, goes into the anti-hero trope of I'm doing the right thing or I'm doing the wrong thing, but I'm doing it for the right reason,
Mm-hmm.
or at least the right reason
In
in
his
his
eyes,
mind.
correct.
So I, I get why people would see it that way. I don't see it that way. I have seen, I will admit, I go on Reddit quite a bit. I read Reddit, subreddits, and all that kind of stuff. That's where I'm getting my information about how people view him from. You can try to sway my decision as well, or my opinion, and tell me why you think he's a villain. I'm hoping that what we have said might sway you the other way. But, everybody's entitled to their own opinion.
Correct. And I think key points. It's the same thing we said with, or I mentioned with the bait. He doesn't know who she is. Why would he care? Did he stop and sit down and listen to her life story? No. Would that have changed it? Maybe. But he doesn't have the time because he's gonna die, and he doesn't have the patience because it's been 200 freaking years. He's been working on this whole project to find his family for 200 goddamn years. All right, and who knows how long he was stuck in the ground where he figures I could be losing all this time trying to find my family who I don't know if they're alive or dead, don't have any idea. So like putting it into the perspective of think about it from 200 years you've been trying to find your family. 200 years is a freaking week is a long freaking time. Now put it
Mm-hmm.
into 200 years. That's a long time. And though he may have been a good person in the beginning, like before the war, I think he was. I think he truly was a good person.
Mm-hmm.
That 200 years changes a person. And he might have been a really good guy where he tried to do the right thing and got screwed over. Fallout fans, put in
Mm-hmm.
the comments, what was your favorite time when you tried to help somebody and they screwed you over in the game? Please, by all means. There's probably 100 different examples from all the games where you did the right thing and that person screwed you over, sold you to a slaver, shot you in the back. I can think of one just from New Vegas. Think about the star bottle caps, folks. Think about the way you're luring the star bottle caps, all right? Same freaking thing, all right? So it happens in the games. It's certainly going to happen in real life if this ever happened. Um, and the last thing I'll point is, though another reason why I don't think he's the villain is you see him start to change because he starts to remember that point in the movie that he made where he says that line in Spanish. I apologize. I don't remember it word for word, but it was like you were dumb or you were ugly, you were strong, and you were what was the last? Not heroic, but
I don't
you
remember.
had honor, something like that. I apologize. I should have written it down because it is a big point of him. But he has that flashback, and he has it several times where that phrase comes up. I think he says it once, and he has the flashback because that's how he wants to be. I really think he wants to, and I think in season 2 we're gonna see him change to you were ugly, but you were strong, and you had morals basically. And I think he's gonna kick back to how he was pre-war, and I think Lucy's gonna help him get there, and I think that's gonna be a really cool interaction between the two of how Lucy's goodness is going to bring back his pre-war fight for justice because I think we started seeing that. I think we'll see more of his fight for justice before the bombs dropped. And I think we're going to see him as more of a positive character in the second. So I think you're going to see a big change in the Ghoul. And I don't think if he was the villain of the story that they would set it up for him to have a redemption arc like that, because there would be no redemption
Mhm.
arc. He would be the villain. Anything
Mhm.
else on the Ghoul?
And yeah, and think about it this way when it comes to his relationship with Lucy and the things that he's doing to Lucy. She is a vault dweller. She doesn't know anything about the surface world. She's actually probably more of a liability to him than an asset. And so, yes, he uses her as bait. That is a useful thing for him to be able to get the gulper so that he can get the head. Yes, he trades her for drugs or whatever the case may be, but he when you see Lucy in the beginning, she up until that point, I didn't really see Lucy as this badass character. I still saw a lot of that, goody two shoes type feel to her, despite the fact that she's done some pretty awful things. She still didn't strike me as a person that's really going to thrive in the wasteland. So to him in that moment, she's expendable. And again, he can carry her the rest of the journey to, deliver the head, find her father, and all that. But she doesn't really have the intelligence to survive the wasteland, from what I'm seeing. So in his mind, it may not be that he's not necessarily a villain here. It's just, is she even going to survive the wasteland to begin with?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was until after that whole thing with the organ harvester happened, when she drops the medicine in front of him and she says, I may end up looking like you, but I'll never be you. I think that's when he started to view her in a different light.
Right.
And like, she is not this expendable person. She is somebody that could actually help him on his journey. So when you're thinking about villains, they don't give a fuck about anybody. I think in that moment it changed his perception. In the beginning, like I said, I think he really saw her as more of a liability and somebody who's expendable, somebody who's not going to survive the wasteland anyway because she comes from a vault and she doesn't have to survive. She comes from a place where food is aplenty, water is aplenty. Don't really have to fight for survival. How is she going to survive the wasteland? Maybe in his mind he thought he was doing her a kindness, kind of like the ghoul that he shot in the head. Albeit very, very horrible way to go. If he, Again, maybe that's what he thought. Like, you're not going to survive anyway. So what's the point?
I might as well get something out of it too. We're not
Hmm.
claiming that he's a good guy. I don't think anybody here is like
No, no, no,
he is the
no.
beacon of this is how. No, nobody's saying that. But I don't see him as the villain. If anything, Hank's the villain. All right. I mean, he freaking nuked the
Alt Tech
town.
is the villain.
Yeah. Well, I will say that Vault-Tec is only like an idea. I will say in this one, in my opinion, Hank is definitely the villain. Which,
Hmm.
real quick about, are we? Do we have anything else on the Ghoul before I tangent? I'm gonna
Yeah.
tangent really quick. When we were in Vault 31, I was rewatching the episode when I was editing, and I think because you know that Hank was like a delivery guy for
Hmm.
his wife. I think that the further back you go, the higher the level of because if you see in Vault 31, there's only like a couple of pods that are empty. The rest are full, but it's not all the way down. It's deep, but it's not like um like Outer Worlds deep. If anybody's played that game, don't recommend it. Outer Wilds is much better, but um like theirs, they have these pods that go on forever and ever and ever and ever because there's thousands of people in the ship. Here, it's pretty short in comparison, so there's maybe like 100 or 200 people there. I think the further back you go, the higher the management level in Vault-Tec. That's my theory, and I think that if that's the case, his family's probably in that vault. I think it's all going to come back to the Vault 31, but I think we're all, that's a lot of people's theories. Is they're obviously frozen because it's all Vault-Tec. It's just that Lucy doesn't know what Norm knows, and the Ghoul certainly doesn't know. So it'll be a really good, like, full circle moment. But I think that's why, because Hank, there's only a couple pods that are open, and Hank would have been the first couple of pods. I think they go further back to protect those really high-end managers, because if management is the key to the future, you want your best managers to come out last. So
Mhm.
I find Hank to be though it was set up by Vault-Tec, I find Hank to be the villain because he made the decision to nuke Sandy Shores. He made the decision to to leave his wife there to die or to kill his wife. Or he left her behind, took the kids and left her to get nuked.
Mhm.
To where she turned into the feral ghoul. He made all those decisions. So, and killed 34,000 people. He didn't have to. We already talked about, I don't think I put it in the episode, but there's a whole vault. There was a vault overseer in Vault 88 or whatever the number is from Fallout 4 that knew what was, read the experiment sheet, said no, and shut that shit down so that the vault could survive. The scientists were stuck in their own little prison until they all died of old age. And then the vault continued to live on, opened the doors, let outsiders in, let insiders out, promoted trade, and they're thriving. So it really comes down to the overseers. At any point, Betty could have stopped it and said, "Hey, guess what? There's some crazy shit going on in 31." At any point, Stephanie could have come up and said, "Hey, 31's a freaking shit show. It's totally different." At any point, any of that could happen, but none of them did. So now it comes down to the people and our individual
Mhm.
choice. Total side tangent. My bad. If there's nothing else about the ghoul, we can move on to let's move on to do we have anything on Lucy and Maximus, like their relationship? Did you want to talk about anything? Hi everyone, Editing Colleen here. While editing, I realized that this video is going to be a long one, so I'm going to split it up into two parts. The second part will be out next week. Thank you for watching.